What's going on, everybody? Mark here. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite movie, Love Exposure. So this is just going to be me reading the thematic analysis of Love Exposure, which I already posted to Instagram. Thought some people might prefer to listen to me talk rather than reading really small text on a picture. So, let's jump in. First, quick disclaimer and overview. Love Exposure is not for everybody. If you don't like weird media, or if sexually perverse content will prevent you from taking something seriously or ruin your general enjoyment of the story, this film is probably not for you. Love Exposure is the best movie ever made, in my humble opinion. After watching hundreds of the most acclaimed movies among art fans, this stands as handily my favorite. It focuses on one key dynamic as a means of exploring a singular theme that it is laser focused on. This, along with its 4-hour runtime, allows it to overcome what I see as the main flaw in most movies: lack of detailed development. So, that one theme, idealization. Love Exposure is hyperfixated on just one theme, idealization. That is specifically idealization as it pertains to the basis on which we form our relationships, chiefly the romantic. The film's initial idealization is of his mother, and as the first idealization we find in life through our first connection, this is the first scene of the movie. Our central character, Yu Honda, promises his mother he will find a woman like Maria to marry. Maria is the Virgin Mary, the most prominent symbol of a traditionally idealized woman in modern history. Yu grows up believing to the point of physical manifestation that the only woman for him, in any capacity, is his Maria. Not a human being, an ideal, not love, but a form of worship. Conversely, Yoko, also known as Yu's Maria, idealizes Jesus Christ as the only man who isn't completely worthless, aside from Kurt Cobain, of course, and good pick, Yoko. These figures are specifically important in the following qualities: Mary, pure, virginal, free of sin, motherly, the traditional and pretty misogynistic requirements expected of the perfect woman. Jesus Christ, although not necessarily the masculine ideal of a John Wayne, is more fitting for Yoko, a girl traumatized in her adolescence by her violent, sexually abusive father who grew to hate men. Jesus is omnibenevolent, pure, free of lust, self-sacrificial, regardless of any personal connection. He is the idealized, unthreatening savior. The early sections of Love Exposure mirror a shonen anime trope, of force-feeding you a character's backstory right before they die. The technique is usually lazy and ineffective, as it's applying context and depth to a character and situation you didn't get the benefit of attachment to initially, even regardless of the giveaway it poses to what's about to happen. Here, it's incredibly effective in its sequencing, as it's the first scene of the film and advances plot points in a focused manner that takes many movies much longer to establish. Yu's mom as a character is well handled. The transition through his naivete, his dad's relatively healthy escapism, and becoming a community leader as a priest. Hey, it's better than drugs at least. Probably one of the best ways I've seen somebody get over losing their wife, to be fair. And Yu has a healthy, normal childhood until the arrival of Kaori. In our next section, perversion. First, I want to say I don't condone the acts in the movie, nor does the film itself. The perversion of this movie is born directly as a contrast to religion. Yu's father finds priesthood as an escape from processing the grief of his wife's death. At first, this comes with a safe but shallow relationship with Yu. He hugs the child Yu, but spends silent dinners with him. Church isn't something Yu has ever had a real relationship with. He doesn't care about religion or Christianity. He's not well versed in the Bible. He's merely seeking his father. His father is courted by Kaori, eventually acquiescing into being with her. It's a weird sequence. He lies to the church and to himself in doing so. His glass house of comfort shatters. He has to face the reality of his grief while also now dealing with the guilt of the lies and sins, particularly sexual sins, as he gave in to the relationship with Kaori, and they've been hiding from the church that they've been living as a married couple when priests are not allowed to have sex or engage with relationships in any way. He seeks to feel better about himself by lashing out at you, making him confess his sins. Real healthy dad. Hoping to feel better in comparison. You, however, grew up in a plastic-wrapped, overly innocent life of a churchgoer, and is almost comically naive and kind. He can't even step on an ant and has to lie to manufacture sins. It seems a bit absurd, but as the movie tends to, it's scarily accurate within its absurdity. The presentation of this element and of the film may be over the top, but the core of it is dead on. This will later extend to you and Yoko's relationship, which is seemingly the most exaggerated thing ever, but is cuttingly, terrifyingly, the reality of most romantic relationships, at least in my experience and what I've seen around me. Regardless, we see the seeds of parental trauma defining actions and idealizations once again. The mother creates the Maria ideal, and the father creates the contrasting perversion and rebellion against it. Perversion in love exposure, in all three central characters, is the adverse action stemming from the trauma which also shaped their idealizations. However, it's a rejection that will contrast with the other's idealizations and cause conflict. Yu violates women to rebel against his father's abuse. Aya becomes a cultist murderer to rebel against her father's abuse. And Yoko, the only one who doesn't do anything heinous, questions her sexuality, believing herself a lesbian based on her hatred of men at the hands of her father's abuse. That is a whole lot less harmful. And to be fair, she may just be attracted to women, but the movie frames it in a way where it seems to be stemming from her abuse and as a reaction against it. Yu seeks out Sin for the pathetic goal of his father's anger. At least it's his father interacting with him, so he thinks. He joins the Pika Panty Brigade, and we get a purely insane montage of ninja-esque competition of this as a counter towards the miracle displays repeatedly. What's strange is Yu isn't doing any of this out of sexual desire. He doesn't have any interest in this sexually. He is solely pursuing ideals. Sin towards his father and the pursuit of Maria. He's not aroused when he's looking at these women against their consent. He's never been hard in his entire life. So the first time he is, he'll have found his Maria. Okay, strange. Usually we don't have a boner as a fundamental symbol of a movie, but we'll go with it. So, let's talk about our other two main characters, Yoko and Aya. Yoko is Yu's Maria, his idealization. The first time he sees her is referred to as the miracle by the film, as we watch the countdown of days until the miracle takes place, wondering what could it be. But it's an artificially crafted scenario by Aya. It's not a miracle at all. It's very finely pulled strings to create a situation that will be perceived as such. Poignantly, the only reason Yu even identifies Yoko as his Maria is because she kneels down to pray and is draped in a veil, which makes her seem like Maria. It couldn't be more artificial. He does not know her, anything about her, or even find her especially physically attractive compared to other pretty girls that he's creeping out. It is solely based on the trauma-induced idealization of Maria his mother instilled in him, and grew due to parental neglect and abuse over time. Yoko was abused physically and sexually by her father, and lived in the absence of a mother. He tried to give her mothers, but they never cared for her until Kaori. This defined Yoko's ideals. She's a tough guy, a badass, and she hates all men. She refers to her father exclusively as the asshole, and sees all men as extensions of him. When she first sees Yu, he is dressed in drag as Miss Scorpion, and comes to save her. It's just as perfectly set up as his idealization is. All she's wanted in a sort of Freudian level is motherly salvation from the horrors of men. So Miss Scorpion immediately becomes her ideal. A young girl with pictures of Joan Jett and Patti Smith and a host of other female rebellious rock stars she looks up to, ends up falling for the woman who beats up a group of men trying to attack her. This is hardly surprising. We see a major shift from the stoic badass to a teenage girl in love. She's invested in the ideal. Aya is the antagonist of love exposure. The film intends to expose truth in love. She intends to expose love itself as a falsity. Her father is brutal. He's ironically a portrait of the idealized Christian successful man, but he beats his daughter and abuses her sexually, forcing her to say, "Give it to me," as he whips her with a belt. She will repeatedly say this phrase as her insanity surfaces across the film, letting us know, hauntingly and consistently, where it's coming from. She's a nihilist and becomes co-opted by the Zero Church cult because of her original sin, the trauma that made her a psychopathic murderer. She takes fascination with you as a means of proving her philosophy, which becomes her purpose in a meaningless life. She speaks of his original sin when they meet. She makes the connection with herself and sets out to shatter his idealized Maria, to prove that his love is not love, or even worship, what it actually is, but simply an expression of pain. She conjures the majority of events of the film and guides the plot through nearly every shift that it takes. She might as well be the film's writer. If you've seen the anime Monster, she is Johan, a less fleshed out, of course, version, but she's functionally the same. And you is her Tenma. She's seeking to prove an invalidation of her own existence in a sort of perverse rooftop game. Family. The miracle takes place, and immediately our plot threads are woven together. Yoko and Yu become brother and sister at the impending marriage of their parents. Love exposure poses family in an interesting way. They are all disconnected. Shots of their dinners together are quiet, standoffish, and full of awkward acting. Yu does not want to be siblings with his Maria, and she figures him a creepy stalker based on his lack of self-awareness in pursuit of her. Her treatment of Yu adds some interesting characterization in her rapid switching between dominating girl boss and helpless, traumatized, and powerless, running to Miss Scorpion for help. Yu makes a mistake. He fails to tell Yoko how he feels, or to interact with her as a person. Instead, he pursues her as an object to be won. His Maria, no different than the figurine he carries around, he lies to as Miss Scorpion, an identity that is a lie itself, and begins to advance his case towards her love. Unfortunately, this lie simply adds a layer to the artificiality of their relationship. Yoko is now kind to Yu, but it's a fake kindness because she loves Scorpion, who is Yu, and she only loves Scorpion because of her own idealization. It's a bit to process, but the film works on these levels consistently throughout, so it's vital to call out explicitly, as you must be aware of it at all times to appreciate the film. An interesting side component, which I don't think is explored in too much depth, but is nonetheless present, is the idealization of family itself. Their interactions and their relationships with each other are exclusively built off of title. These people do not love, understand, or choose each other in any way beyond the innately established. The family, in every way, shape, and form, is a facade, one that will crumble as soon as Aya intervenes. Aya takes up the mantle of Scorpion to win over Yoko, or more specifically, to take her from Yu. She delves into her lesbian rebellion, exposes Yu's upskirt photography, and creates a traumatic rift between our star dynamic. Yoko's idealization shatters. Similar to Yu's father and Yu himself later on, when someone seeks to cope through idealization as most do, they break when their idealization does. If Scorpion is not the lady boss savior, but a creepy, perverted man, who will save her? How can she validate herself? And an inability to answer these questions, she snaps. Kaori blatantly says it's for Yoko, and they join the cult, the Zero Church. Now Aya is in control, and love is in danger of exposure. Next section, 1 Corinthians 13. Yu's family disappears amidst his despair of Yoko's hatred of him. He delves further into the perverted as Aya forces his hand, aiming to distance himself further and further from Yoko. to make him the antithesis of the ideal, all while he comes closer and closer to engaging with her genuinely. Eventually, Yoko is found. Yu's group kidnaps her, and he sits with her, bound all night. He's not going about it the right way, obviously. Kidnapping someone and totally denying their agency as a human being is not okay. But for artistic purposes, his intent has switched. He is still acting for Maria, but he also cares for Yoko's well-being, correctly assessing her cultist brainwashing. Eventually, Yu loosens Yoko, and she obviously runs away. We are met with one of the most maximalist and overpowering scenes in cinema history, in the Corinthian speech. Yoko only half knows what she's talking about in this scene, and I say that very specifically. She becomes impassioned because on a physical level, she was saved, and it was clearly not what she wanted, so she, still clinging to her ideals of Jesus, finds more weight in this verse as it allows her to cryptically express how she feels without shattering her ideals. Stole that quote directly from my brother, but moving on. I think she's in the middle of this verse, developmentally, as a character, as she's facing the content of the Bible verse. When I was a child, I talked as a child. I thought as a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put the ways of childhood behind me. For now we see only reflection, as in a mirror. Then we shall see face to face. Now I know in part. Then I shall know fully, even as I am fully known. But they are both children. They both reason as children, as most of us do, as most love in the real world is. The pain of stripping down through the mirror to genuinely engage with someone face to face is too much, and the impetus is rarely there. How, where, why does one acquire the desire to understand and be understood by others? What Yoko does here is ground us in this point of the arc, but in doing so, she exposes the gap to fill as they seek love face to face. The speech calls out the reality of the conflict they are both now fully aware of, but lacking in perspective on how to move forward with. Yu, still largely working through idealization, retorts their similarity, saying she's wrong to call him a pervert, as she is as well, at least by homophobic social standards that I'd imagine apply here. The underlying message being that their shared trauma, or through their shared trauma, that is, they can seek mutual understanding as they've rooted their conflicts now within each other and have the basis to move forward in a truthful path to love. Yu then brings Yoko back to the bus and starts reading the Bible, this Corinthians verse specifically, and Yoko pipes up. This is vital. This is his first effort in seeking understanding of Yoko after a relationship of false ideals, silence when they're together, an inability to communicate the host of similarities they really have. He takes a step forward. As a result of this, they spend a peaceful moment together, staring at the sea, maybe even enjoying each other's company for a change. That is, until Aya shows up, ripping open Yoko's wounds, exposing Yu's very symbolic but also very literal boner, metaphoric of his sexualized idealization of Maria as a woman, an object, an ideal, something that he worships rather than a person. And Yoko slips back into madness, reclaimed by the Zero Church. So, let's talk about the Zero Church. Aya's nihilism and the cave. Nihilism is such a common antagonistic force in storytelling that it's become a bit overdone to me, but luckily it comes in different flavors to keep it engaging. Rick from Rick and Morty's cosmic nihilism, Bojack from Bojack Horseman's existential nihilism, and Johan from Monster's pure nihilism are all quite different from Aya's nihilism of love. Aya parallels Yu's father as they both turn to religions as escape from trauma. Unfortunately, Aya joins a cult and is managed hands-on by psychopaths. After constructing the events of the story, in effort to prove her nihilism, as I outlined in her dedicated section, she now has control over Yu, making him a member of the church. Her goal, to condition his boner. Weird as it may seem and as the story is, but it makes a lot of sense symbolically. The only person Yu is aroused by is Maria, and through psychological manipulation, she works against this and eventually demonstrating she's taken away his ability to get hard, that is. She tries to advance this by sexually arousing Yu herself, but it fails. If she were able to, she would have succeeded in shattering the idealization while proving it was not the form of worship that it is, but simply perversion. The movie argues that the majority of romantic love is based in idealization, but there is a path to genuine connection. But if Aya had won here, she'd transition this argument that love is merely idealization, that's fickle, easily co-opted, and had no foundation or basis for meaningful potential. Luckily, she fails in validating her flavor of nihilism here, and Yu will move on to more fully defeated further on. I wasn't sure how significant the most overused reference in philosophy of Plato's The Cave was in the context of love exposure. We see early on the budding Zero Church members are called caves. Those are the lowest level, what Yu is upon joining. But why? I wouldn't have questioned the significance of this if I spoke Japanese natively. The song that plays in the title screen during the early montages of the movie, yes, the ridiculous, perverted ninja ones, the Zero Church section, and most importantly, sung by Yu before his rebellion, is lyrically conducive to the imagery and thematic significance of this idea, placing musical emphasis on it. You can look up the lyrics, I'll put a link in the description. But effectively, they describe being a cave with its heart stolen, looking down on stupid kids. This is fascinating as we deepen the positioning of Yu as the cave rather than the viewer of the shadows within it. The shadows are projected onto him, so he is the cave, for others to watch. This works both metatextually, as we are watching his false view, the idealization, by watching this film, but also internally as Yu's inner sense of self, a metaphor for his internal questioning he is going through in this scene, a scene of rejecting Aya. It links back to the Corinthians verse in alluding to the children, but specifically in calling them stupid, its explicit statement of advancing further down the path in Corinthians as Yu's heart moves closer to desire for Yoko, based increasingly in her as a person, not as a god to worship, from her sharing her heart with him, as we saw in the last section. Lastly, in the song, the cave is positioned as being the whole within heart. The cave itself is the whole. The implication being that the cave metaphor, probably in all of its forms, is created from the lack of understanding-based genuine connections. Shadows people see on the wall, or the expectation that their view must be a shadow, that there must be something more, which would better fit the physical state of being a cave, suggests that idealization is the creator of this, is the reason for lack of fulfillment. It's detailing, to add scope to the story's conflict. So, now that Yu is rejecting Aya, we move on to the plot-based climax of the story at the Zero Church. So, once again, our perverted, Christ-like protagonist goes to save Maria. Yoko? Maria. Hilariously, he links up with the crazy bomber guy and gets armed up. We see him invade the Zero Church and see interesting visualization of it. People are zombie-like, meandering around, attending brainwashing sessions, and wearing white powder on their faces. I like the use of color in these scenes. The people are coated in white, a false sense of purity, as the religion in general, is. The rooms become fully white as we get deeper into the building, ready to be stained with the blood of Yu's victims. Yu confronts Aya. She has taken Maria away from him again. Yu will reclaim Maria, save Yoko. However, he is apprehended. Yoko is still shattered in her idealization and does not embrace Yu. Aya takes control and pushes Yoko to kill Yu. Yu does not fight back. He has infinite hope that she will see him. He starts to cry a tear of blood in the scene depicted above, or at least would have been depicted above if this was the Instagram post. But if you can recall the image of Yu shedding a tear of blood while Yoko chokes him. This moment is vital. Yu cries a tear of blood, which is later explained to be the brutal pain of the childlike facade of idealized romance leaving the body. It's also a pretty clear allusion to the end of Evangelion. Normally, I might not make such a leap. I don't really like just assuming that things that are similar must be based on each other, but Evangelion is effectively Star Wars in Japanese culture. Its ubiquity lends to my confidence that this is not a leap. If I saw an American movie where somebody was lifting somebody up, choking them by the neck without touching them, I would assume that it's a Star Wars allusion. The scene plays out the same, too. Yu reaches out to Maria, his hands, a symbol for agency, reach to her face, a symbol for identity, but he cannot connect as she chokes him. Aya, watching, performs the key action of the movie, the key physical action, that is. She throws the Maria statue at the wall. It shatters, soaked in a pool of blood, an overwhelmingly beautiful image in full context of what it means. The ideal, physically, has been shattered. Yu loses his fucking mind. It would be reductive for me to try to say that more formally. He starts screeching like an insane person. Maria is everything to him. He has just been rejected physically in symbol and literally in the denial of his hand. The tears did not fully shed. Maria and Yoko are blurred, and he's too emotionally beaten to process this any further. Aya, shockingly almost, kills herself with Yu's sword. Counterintuitively, I personally believe that she kills herself out of a lack of conviction. Yes, she's seen her plans through to break Yu, but it's not at all final. I think she decides to quit while she's ahead out of fear that the tides may turn. But either way, the ends are that she set out to validate her nihilistic philosophy, and she follows through on it, ending her meaningless life after proving her point in the one debate she cared to have. Her last words are, "Fall apart, Yu," as she hopes she's as proven as she believes. So, we get a soft reset, and everything seems to go back to peace of some sort. Yoko is living with relatives, and Yu is in a mental asylum believing he is Miss Scorpion. And now we push forward to the thematic climax of the film. Yu retreats into the persona of Scorpion as he cannot accept the shattering of the ideal. He retreats to the moment of the miracle, the one point in the movie he felt happy and hopeful, in all honesty. Yoko becomes further intrigued by Yu. Did he just save her? Again? She watches his perverted videos, and we specifically see her watch shots of Yu saying he is searching for his Maria. Yoko getting confirmation and understanding of Yu and what he truly wants, what his perverted pursuits were, not sexual reasons, but to find her. As she is clearly reconsidering who this man she means the world to, her brother, the secret identity of her ideal, her savior, kind of, who he is, she talks to her younger cousin. She explains her own romantic feelings. When I was a child. She explains the tears of blood, how they are the pain of the comfort in believing idealization as enough, leaving the body, the pain that you now know it isn't enough, and you're confronted with reality. Yoko starts to cry. She understands her lack of understanding of Yu, her lack of understanding of herself. She checks her tears for blood, but we don't see any. But the implication is she feels the blood should be there, which is honestly more important. Next, we get a parallelism of Yu's efforts to save Yoko, played in reverse. She goes to the mental hospital, armed and ready to spring him out. They have the exact interaction of the miracle, played from opposite roles. And as Yu starts to remember who he is, who she is, more and more he loses his grip on his sanity. Yoko opens up. She acknowledges Yu, not Scorpion, or Jesus, or Kurt Cobain, but Yu. She tells him she loves him. We watch as Yu slowly calms from his nervous breakdown, considering what he heard, questioning who he is and what he wants. We are met with the peak of the film. Yu considers Maria, the now shattered ideal, how it came about, and we see visual symbolism depicting its nature and its death, and Yu looks down and gets a boner. It's very annoying to me that of all things, what I consider the best moment in all of film has to be this. I have a hard time explaining this to anybody, and usually I don't. But hopefully, if you've been watching this whole video, this seems more reasonable to you than it would to the outside observer. But yes, Yu gets hard for the first time out of love for a person rather than the worship of an ideal. Yu has confronted himself, confronted the impetus for the false ideal, accepting the shattered idol, and understands that he loves Yoko for her, and his feelings are now based in compassion for and an understanding of her. He has founded the rare but overwhelming, legitimate romantic relationship. He flees the hospital in a ridiculous chase scene and looks at Yoko, not Maria, for the first time, accepting her and their reshaped relationship. My confidence in the forward success, hypothetically speaking, in a story is always a good indicator of quality and impact to me. And there is zero doubt in my mind, well, assuming they can work out all of the legal issues, that Yu and Yoko will be happy and in love together. And I thank them for showing me this process, for calling out the falsities, giving me something to think about, something to feel as I've come to reshape my own views on romance and what true love actually is. The best movie. Thank you for listening.